Hello guys, and welcome to a very special edition of the Russian Football News Predictions League preview. I'm here in Moscow after Manchester United beat CSKA Moscow last night 4-1. I'm here in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Actually, very nice place to do a bit of work, free Wi-Fi, and I somehow managed to sneak into a tech conference, got a load of free food. They got their own back, charged me 800 rubles for tea in the cafe later, but anyhow. So, we've had the two Champions League games in midweek. Spartak Moscow against Liverpool, 1-1, which somehow Massimo Carrera's men managed to get a point out of, completely and utterly dominated. And of course last night Manchester United saw off CSKA Moscow without any trouble at all, 4-1, absolutely battered them, men against boys. However, it's back to Russian Premier League action. Now, we have an international break coming up, and we have some Predictions Cup fixtures to sort out as well. Now, you're going to have to bear with me. I know this is a bit late, but I am going to catch a plane in about 3 hours' time, so I will be posting all of the necessary notices that you will need in due course. However, for the time being, guys, we're just going to focus on the Predictions League. I'll give you updates on the Cup later, like I said, but for now, Predictions League. So, let's get straight to it. So, first up, we have Arsenal Tula at home to Krasnodar. Krasnodar, they are getting through the worst of their injury worries now. Tornike Okrashvili is back. He's made a couple of substitute appearances, and it looks like Stefan Strandberg is about their only absentee. Now, last week, of course, we had Krasnodar against Zenit, which is probably the biggest game of the weekend. Zenit just outclassed them, 2-0 in Krasnodar, in a magnificent arena. Arsenal Tula, having a bit of a strange season under Miodrag Bozovic. Some good results, some really poor results. And last week they lost away to Ufa. Now, Ufa themselves have been struggling, so I would have expected Arsenal to get something out of that. Anyhow, those are the two results. So what do we see happening here? Well, if I'm honest, I'm going to find this fairly hard to call between them. But Krasnodar have infinitely more talent on paper. Now, as we know, the Russian Football Premier League rarely follows form on paper. However, I do think Krasnodar are going to have enough to get through this one. They, of course, don't have European commitments. If they did, that might have affected this one. However, they don't. I think it'll be a tight game. I don't think it's going to be an especially high-scoring one, but I do think Krasnodar will have most of it. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 to Krasnodar. I don't know. It may be even low-scoring than that, but I'm going to go for 2-1 to Krasnodar. So that's my call in that one. Okay, moving on. Next game up, we have SKA Khabarovsk at home to Rostov. Every team, of course, the whole season will be dreading that trip far out east, and Rostov will be no different. Rostov, of course, have been struggling a lot of late. They haven't won in the last 5 games. They've lost the last 2. And they've actually dropped out of the European qualification places, having been in the Champions League places earlier this season, which of course shocked us all after all of their players had departed. And of course the manager, Kurban Badev, but they're still there, they're still 6th, they're still ahead of Ural Yekaterinburg, and that is a seal of approval if ever there was one. But they lost last weekend to Lokomotiv. A 93rd minute header from Eder, who's the Portuguese, the European Championships winner, winning goal scorer in the final, of course, last summer. He scored his first goal, agonising for Rostov. I really thought a draw was written all over that game, and it was up until the very last moment. And of course, SKA Khabarovsk, well, they have been very tight, as is the want of most promoted clubs. They try and keep tight defensive record, and to be fair, they've only conceded 6 goals all season. And when you bear in mind that sorry, what am I talking about? They've only scored 6 goals. They've only conceded 13 goals. I say only 13. It doesn't sound desperately impressive, but for a newly promoted side, who, don't forget, they're the ones that have to travel every other week such long distances. Well, the equivalent of, I know some away games are grouped together, but you know what I mean. And last week we had Amcar at home to SKA Habarovsk, and Amcar managed to score 3. Now, if Amcar score once, that's bad enough, but to score 3 is a fairly damning indictment of your team's performance. So, what do we see with this? Both teams struggling is the headline. Neither have won for 5 games, and I can't separate the two of them. I think it will be a draw. And in terms of the the actual scoreline, I'm not going to be very original. I'm going to go for 0-0. It's becoming a default prediction for games involving SKA Habarovsk at home, but that's what I'm going for. Shoot me if you like, but that's what I'm going for. Okay, next up, we've got to move on here. Tosno at home to Akhmat Grozny. Last week we had Tosno away to Ural, and Ural have won Ural won their 3rd game of the season and are now up to 7th in the table, 2 points ahead of Spartak Moscow, looking very good. Only Zenit have lost fewer games than Ural, so no shame there for Tosno losing that. Tosno themselves are in the relegation playoff zone with 9 points, only 1 point ahead of rock bottom Anzhi. And so they're facing Akhmat Grozny. Akhmat last week, Akhmat played at home to Rubin Kazan, and they won that game 1-0, so good result for them. They at the moment are in the Europa League playoff places. I don't expect it to last over the season because they have been inconsistent so far. However, for this game, it's a tough one to call. Tosno have failed to win at home yet this season at the Petrovsky, but how do we see it going? I can't separate them. Again, there's so many games in the Russian Premier League that are really difficult to predict. Last week in the Predictions League game, it was the 2nd lowest average points per player that we've had this season. I was actually surprised it was the 2nd. I thought it would be the lowest, but anyhow, there we are. It was a difficult week. So, Tosno at home to Akhmat. I'm going for a draw. I'm going to go for 1-1 though. I think there is plenty of attacking potential for Akhmat, and Tosno, despite the statistics, they do have some attacking threat, and we've yet to see the best of Georgi Melkadze on loan there. So that's what I'm going for, 1-1. Okay, moving on, we have Rubin Kazan at home to Amcar PM. Well, Amcar, to be fair to them, they've now won 3 of the last 4 games. They are out of the relegation zone. And 3 or 4 weeks ago, it would have been impossible to foresee them really putting more than a lucky win on the record, but they've now won 3 and 4. So they're one of the form teams. It's quite ridiculous to hear ourselves saying that, but it's true. They scored 3. And of course, Stanislav Prokofiev, FC Tyumen legend, RFM bingo, set up one of the goals. So it's understandable why they're starting to score again. So what do we see here? Well, they're away from home. Now, to be fair to Amcar, you can't blame them. They've done very, very well to drag themselves out of what was a dire situation. But the truth remains, they actually are not too bad away from home. They've only scored 3 goals though. Rubin, they are the 2nd highest scorers at home. Yes, they've lost Jonatas, but they still have. Now they've got a chance to give Sardar Azmoun more game time, which I think is actually going to be. It's going to make it not a negligible difference, but it will soften the blow considerably of Jonatas' departure. So for this game, I'm going for a Rubin win. It's partly because I don't like Amcar. Ural rivals, they'd never play particularly attractive football. I don't think it's going to be high scoring, but I'm going to go for 1-0 to Rubin. Okay, moving on. Spartak Moscow at home to Ural on Saturday. Well, again, beginning of the season, if you had said that this fixture, 11 games into the season, and Ural would be ahead of Spartak Moscow in the table, 2 points clear of them, you would have been laughed at. Spartak have a long injury list. They were without Quincy Promes for the Champions League game. Pedro Rocha did come off the bench, so that was something. but they have a lot of injuries. They've had an energy-sapping draw against Liverpool in the Champions League. Now, admittedly, it was on Tuesday, not Wednesday, so it's a reasonable amount of time for them to recover, but even still, it's going to be a challenge. Real, well, they're very confident at the moment. Like I said, they won their third game of the season last week against Tottenham. That's the last 2 games in a row they've won. They're up to 7th in the table. They're 1 point behind the Europa League qualification places, so a lot is going for them. However, it is still away in Moscow. It's a long journey, one of the longest for Real, and it is Spartak Moscow. They are still a very good side, and a 1-1 draw against Liverpool, whatever you might say about the performance, is a creditable result. It will give them a boost. Possibly Quincy Promes might be back, is unconfirmed, but we'll see. However, maybe it's my bias coming in here. I just get the feeling that this is going to be a draw. I think Real are going to get points out of this. The attacking quality of Spartak means they're always likely to score, so I am going to say they're going to score, but I think it will be 1-1. Eric Falvey has scored 4 goals this season for Real, and they are getting more of their attacking players back into the game, back into fitness. So I'm going to go for 1-1. I don't think many people will join me in that one, but that's what I'm going for. I've got a gut feeling about it. CSKA at home to Ufa. Well, there's no 2 ways about it. They were absolutely battered last night. It was men against boys. They were torn to pieces. A 3-man defence left holes in the back line, inexplicably, really, because they've been a very experienced, a long-standing team playing 3 at the back. What are we going for here? Well, to be quite honest with you, I don't see Ufa reprising their win from last week. CSKA last week drew away to Dynamo Moscow, which not an inspiring result, but it's not a bad result. It's a Moscow derby. So I do think CSKA are going to win this one. What do we think? I'm going to go for 2-0. I think they will recover from the Champions League hangover because they weren't expected to win anyway. Yes, it was heavier than they wanted, but anyhow. Okay, moving on. Running out of time here. Lokomotiv Moscow at home to Dynamo. Now, like I say, Lokomotiv, they got that late winner away to Rubin. Like a lot of their results this season, I would say, they have not blown teams away and possibly been a bit fortunate with a few of them. Dynamo got a good result, like I just mentioned, 0-0 at home to CSKA. So it's a local derby. Lokomotiv in the table right now, they are still second. They are still second in the table. Quite honestly, I don't know how they are still second, but there they are. You can't take it away from them. They can only beat the teams they play. I know it's a cliche, but it's true. So what are we going for here? I think they're going to edge it. I do think they're going to edge it. Yes, they've got Europa League commitments, but Eder has scored, and you cannot put a price on a new striker breaking his duck for his new club. So, what do we see? High scoring? Definitely not. I'm just going for 1-0. Moving on. Okay, we're on to Anzhi at home to Zenit St. Petersburg. And this game, of course, will be, if we can just get the fixtures right, the last game, this will be on Sunday evening. Anzhi last week, they, pardon me, let's find them, 2-2 away to Spartak Moscow. Of course, how could we forget? The iconic image of the game was when Anzhi broke clear with a 5-on-1 situation. Utterly ridiculous defending by Spartak, and Anzhi were winning. I mean, it's just madness. Anzhi at bottom of the table. They're playing Spartak Moscow, the people's club, arguably the biggest club in the country. Zenit, yes, are more wealthy, but Spartak have the history, they have the players. They do have the players. No, their squad is not as good as Zenit's, but other than that, on paper, they have arguably the best players to call upon. Yes, a lot were injured, so that was a slightly mitigating factor. But this is Anzhi Makhachkala at home. It should have been a battle. It wasn't. Plus, they took a mental beating in eking out the 1-1 draw against Liverpool on Tuesday night. So, how do we see this one going? Zenit St. Petersburg, they're playing tonight. In fact, they're playing in about, I believe, 45 minutes at home to Real Sociedad in the Europa League. So they'll be a bit more tired. Yes, they've got to travel down to Dagestan, but this is Zenit. They have so much quality, we say it every week, but it's true. So I think Zenit's going to win. In terms of the scoreline, I'm going to go for a 2-0 to Zenit. Thanks for joining me, guys. That's all I've got time for. So from the Ritz-Carlton in Moscow, that's Vidania.